Hi everyone. So here we will look into the design of WhatsApp or a Facebook Messenger. So this is one more important question that would be asked in the system design. So we will try to understand how to design a WhatsApp or a Facebook Messenger from a very far point of view. I have seen lot of YouTube videos and I have read lot of blogs, and all the YouTube videos which are there in the YouTube gives a very beautiful explanation on how WhatsApp work. Like you might see 30 to 40 minutes of videos. But my goal is to complete this video within 5-10 minutes. So I will try to give you a very far view of how to design a WhatsApp or a Facebook Messenger. So if an interviewer asks you design a WhatsApp or a Facebook, as usual, the first requirement what you need to do is collect the functional requirement from the interviewer. So understand what are the requirement. First ask them like you need one-to-one conversation. Yes, they will say. Do you want this messaging? Once I send the message, do you want to keep the message stored somewhere? They would say, yes, I want the message to be stored and I can come back to my app, open the app, and I should be able to see the message from 1 month back, like all 1 month back information I should be able to see. Okay, write down that information. And you ask them, do you want to see that user online or offline message? Like when I open WhatsApp, I see that that user is online or the time when he was active. Ask that question to them. They say, yes, I need that information. Okay, write down that. Do you need a group messaging information? Like I need to create a group and add all the users to that particular user. They might say, at this point of time, I'm not interested in that part. I need a very basic design, keeping time into the consideration. So, okay, make a note down of all those 4 points. Now let's go further. Write down all the non-functionality requirement. So I got your requirement. I assume that you need high availability. I assume that you need load balancing because there might be a huge amount of information, and obviously you need a zero downtime because you can't have an application with active for a few hours and then go down, right? Like you need to design your system in such a way that it should have a zero downtime. And also tell, are you looking for a monolithic architecture or are you looking for a microservice kind of architecture? So write down all those requirements here and then proceed further. Uh, so how I would design this is like basically I would write, I would do like this. Like a user wants to send a message to some other user who is in US. This user is in India, and this user wants to send a message to a guy who is in US. So basically, when they open a app in their phone, the WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger or any app, that would make a connection to a server. We call this as a chat server. So the chat server is a one which receives the message from the user, and once it receives the message, it sends that message, it reads that message, identifies as the destination server, and sends that message to this chat server. This chat server receives that message, and what it does is it sends that message back to the user who is present in US. Now the message comes to this chat server. From this chat server, it goes to this chat server, and from this chat server, it goes to this user. Now, the second requirement from the interviewer is they want to store the information in a database because they want to read that message. Like after few months, they'll come back and see they need to read all their old messages. So basically, what I would do is I will bring a database into the picture here. So whenever the message has been sent from the user, I will try to store that message in the database, and I will also store these messages inside this database. Okay. So now once the user comes and opens his app and sees the message, he should be able to read all the old databases, all the old messages which are stored in the databases. That's point number one. Now, the point number two that I want to very quickly understand is Rajiv, we have seen so many number of databases. I don't know which database to use. We have seen MongoDB, we have seen MySQL, we have seen Cassandra or HBase. Which database should I use? So even I was like, when I am preparing for a system design interview, I was like getting, oh, man, should I use MySQL or should I use Cassandra here or should I use MongoDB here? What database should I use? Now, I was reading a website and I came to know that we have something called as a cap theorem. So consistency, availability, and then the partition tolerance. So if you are looking for consistency and availability, then I would suggest go for MySQL. If you're looking for availability and partition tolerance, then I would suggest go for Cassandra. If you're looking for partition tolerance and consistency, then you can either go for HBase, Redis, or MongoDB. Now, out of this algorithm, which one should we use? Should I use HBase or should I use Redis or should I use MongoDB? So I was reading a website. In one of the website, they have clearly said that the Facebook new real-time messaging system HBase to store 135 billion messages a month. So why a surprise? Facebook created a Cassandra. It was built for a inbox type of application, but they found that Cassandra eventually consistent model was not a good match for the new real-time message product. So they did not select Cassandra. Facebook also has an extensive MySQL infrastructure, but they found that the performance suffered as the data set and index grew larger. And they could have built their own, but they choose HBase. HBase is a scale out table store supporting a very high rate of row level updates over a massive amount of data. Exactly what is needed for a messaging system. HBase is also a column-based key store built on a big table model. It's good fetching rows by keys or scanning the ranges of rows and filtering. So that's the reason why I would suggest let's go for or let's use HBase. So HBase is one important algorithm that you can uh, go for. Now, Rajiv, how does this HBase? So just let's take a simple scenario, okay? You have user one and you are trying to send that message to user two and user three, okay? So this is user three and user two, and this is user one. Now in HBase, as they told, it's a column-based mechanism. So basically you will have users here, user one, user two, user three. And in the each column, you will have the message ID. Along with that message ID, you will have the message. Similarly, like 212 message hi, 312 message hi. Like for this user, you would have sent hi message. For this user, like it's a column based message and it's very easier to do. So that's one reason why we would have gone for why Facebook would have selected HBase database. So we will go for consistency and then the partition tolerance, and we would select HBase also for our design. Now let's go one step further. Now, basically, there is one more important concept that you need to understand, that is HTTP polling. HTTP polling is HTTP long polling is one more way where the user tries to communicate to the chat server. The user comes up, the user sends the request to the server. The information might not be available immediately, and then it will poll for that user. Like the chat server will keep on looking for the message, and once it receives the message, it sends that message back to the user. So basically, you'll start the connection, and then it will wait. Once it receives some message, it sends that information to the user. And similarly, the chat server will also check for the status management, like whether that user is active or not, at what time he had logged in, or what time he is, whether he is online or not. So this HTTP polling is one very important concept that you need to understand. So what is HTTP long polling? To overcome this, in a nutshell, HTTP long, to overcome this deficiency, web application developer can implement a technique called HTTP long polling. HTTP, basically the problem here is the web applications were originally developed around a client server model, where a web client is always an initiator of a transaction requesting for a data from the server. Thus, there were no mechanism for the server to independently send or push the data to the client without the client first making the request. So to overcome this deficiency, the web application developer can implement a technique called as HTTP polling, where a client polls the server requesting the new information. The server holds the request open until the new data is available. Once available, the server responds and sends the new information, and the client receives this new information, and it immediately sends another request, and the operation is repeated. This effectively emulates a server push feature. This is what I wanted to explain to you guys. Now let's go one step further and look into the high level design point. Let's look into the low level design. All the users who are trying to communicate will first send that request to the load balancer. The load balancer will send that request to the chat server. There might be a communication between chat server to chat server also. And we will use, we won't keep all the database in one place. We will use a concept of data sharding, where we will use a hash based data sharding, like based on the particular user, we will store that database information in particular database. For example, if this user has user ID 99, so 99 percentage 3, I will store that into this database. If this user has 100, user ID as 100 percentage 3, I'll store it into some, like 100 percentage 3 is how much, like server 2. I'll store it somewhere in this database. So I will use a sharding mechanism, hash based sharding mechanism, and try to divide the data across the different database. Saying this, I will end my design for designing the WhatsApp or a Facebook.